Today, I'm joined by James Best, CBE, Chair of the Committee of Advertising Practice, and Matt Bourn, Director of Communications at the Advertising Association, to explore why trust is one of the most valuable assets a brand can build. We'll unpack the ideas behind their new book, Trusted Advertising, from how trusted advertising is evolving to why it matters commercially, where you show up, and how brands can measure and build trust across channels. From digital and out of home to influencers and AI, we'll dig into the brands getting it right and the most important steps marketers can take to put trust at the heart of their advertising. Welcome, Matt and James. Thanks very much for coming in today. This is going to be I think it's going to be a very fascinating session, and I suspect be quite a few topics that we'll uncover on this. But always with these podcasts, the way that we start off is by asking our guests just to explain how you've ended up, or how they've ended up being where they are. So if you could just give us a brief explanation of what you do and of a part of history of how you got there.
Sure. Shall I start?
Come on, Matt.
Okay,
yeah.
So Matt Bourn, I'm the Communications Director at the Advertising Association.
Mm-hmm.
So now the day job is essentially, on behalf of the industry, communicating to government about the issues of the day when it comes to advertising. Mm-hmm. It's my dream job. Mm-hmm. And when I look back as to why it's my dream job, I realised a few years back that I fell in love with the media when I was a paper boy.
Okay.
And I became obsessed, if you like, with what was on the front page of the newspapers every day. And when I was putting them through the letterboxes, how many of which versions of the stories was I putting through the letterbox? Mm-hmm. Because I figured if you could get the one with the most frequency through the letterboxes, that was probably the most powerful story of the day.
Yeah.
And I then followed into communications and studying the business of media and the importance of it. And obviously advertising funds commercial media. It's critical to that, the role that media plays in society. So
okay. Well, it's always good. I think advice to our listeners: go out and get a paper job, or their children should get a paper job.
Start as a paper boy or girl. Definitely.
The influence of that. And James.
Yeah, well, I've had 50 years before the mast, as it were, 50 years in the advertising industry. And I've always loved it. And it's been good enough to love me back. So still here. But the first 30 or so years was making ads, was an agency at life. First of all, researching them, helping to get them onto the screen or the page, working with clients, and then running agencies and then network stuff around the world. Yeah. But then the last, 15 or so years, I've just got really involved in the sort of broader world of the advertising industry through regulation with the ASA and with the Advertising Association, all the kind of aspects of how the industry behaves, how it's seen, how it develops. So finger in lots of pies.
Yeah.
And it would be remiss not to mention, and you won't mention it, but James got awarded a CBE for services to the advertising industry at the beginning of this year. And we refer to James as the wise man of advertising.
Yeah.
Within the AA.
Or commando.
The commando, yeah, indeed. Please. Got to get the head to get right.
Quite
Enough. Indeed. That's fascinating. You're now coming out with a new book. Mm-hmm. What was the motivation for that? Why do you think that now is the right time for this book to come out?
Okay, so this the Trusted Advertising. We pitched it to the publisher Kogan Page. Well, it's the second book that I've been involved in writing, and the pitch was essentially it's anchored in the fact that this year is the Advertising Association's centenary year. Mm-hmm. So we were founded in 1926. Mm-hmm. Imagine the press barons in a room somewhere in central London, all discussing where this kind of new revenue stream was coming into the back of their newspapers. But a conversation around the table was, is anybody checking whether or not these ads are really delivering and saying what they claim they're saying in the ads, because there could be a risk to this fantastic revenue stream if they're not. And so the pitch that I sort of developed was kind of almost to say, well, 100 years on, what on earth has happened to trust generally? So the difference between trust in the 21st century versus trust in the 20th century. And where and how does that then figure when, if you make the argument that you should be more trusted than a competitor to win, where and how does your advertising now fit in that? So that was really the sort of the pitch, and it was just a very timely opportunity, if you like, to really dig into what is now, it seems, everybody wants to talk about trust and understand it.
Yeah,
which is interesting because it's always been there. I mean, as you say, Matt, from 100 years ago, public confidence in advertising was one of the sort of missions, and as soon as we started asking people about it, they all wanted to talk about it, people in the industry. I mean, over 100 people that we talked to, and they're in the book, I guess, who were really keen to talk about it. It really does matter. It always has mattered. It's always been kind of underneath everything else, one of those fundamental aspects of business, life, advertising indeed. And so as we went into the book, we just found there was kind of more and more going on and more to learn about it, and maybe to help people secure it for themselves.
But I think there is, so in some ways, it's always been important.
Yep.
But then in other ways, there is definitely a shift in the way trust works in the 21st century to the way trust worked in the 20th century, which is causing all sorts of challenges to all sorts of institutions, including brands. And within that, what we absolutely have seen is, more and more research, which is proving really that if you want to win versus your competitors, once you've got your quality of your product or service right, the next most critical thing you need to be thinking about is whether the customer trusts you, your brand, more than your competitive set. Because that importance of trust now as a business driver is becoming more and more apparent. And so then if you then build on that, really what you should be asking of every advertising campaign that you deliver is the result of this campaign going to mean that my brand is more trusted or less trusted as a result of this campaign? And then it becomes incredibly nuanced and complex as to how you go about building that trust.
And you preempted actually pretty much the next question, which is all around why should brands care? Around trust. But as you say, it sounds as though if you don't have that trust from the consumer, then the chance of selling your product sort of just become a lot longer.
Yes, that's the fundamental sort of principle of the book, and we start with that point, which is at that moment of purchase, when the customer is, it's B2B as much as it's B2C, is thinking, right, okay, you've got a choice between two. The price is similar, the kind of quality of that service or product is similar, but there's something that's drawing me to one over the other. There's a confidence in what's being promised by that brand will deliver what I'm looking for. And that's the public confidence, the trust in the brand that genuinely you need to build. And you need to think about how your advertising and your broader marketing activity is going to support the overall trust that you want in your brand.
And if you want your message to be trusted, then surely you've got to have a trusted messenger.
Yep.
So the advertising that carries your story, your truth, one hopes, needs itself to carry trust with it, to be trustworthy in itself. So there's a sort of golden thread that connects the success of the business, which is underpinned by its customers' trust, other factors as well, but trust really is fundamental, through to the advertising that it runs and the need that has also to capture people's trust. If it's to convey the message, tell the story, represent the brand that it's paying for.
Mm-hmm. And I think you say this is always been an issue that's been at the heart of advertising for 100 years. But also, as you say, it's an issue that when you wrote the book, solicited a large amount of attention. And it almost feels from the outside as though trust was taken for granted for many decades. And now what we have to do is sort of repeat again why trust is important. I just wonder from your standpoint, sort of what do you think has been sort of the drivers behind sort of the erosion of trust, the things that have impacted it?
So we spoke with behaviour change experts, and there's no less trust. So if we talk about erosion of trust, there's no less trust, no less human trust in the world than there ever has been, in the sense that human beings are born to trust. We come out of the womb and we look to the mother to essentially care for us. So we immediately trust. So that human nature to trust and society's kind of ability to function because we trust each other is as important as ever. What's happened in the 21st century is really technology. And technology has changed the way in which we can trust each other. So in simple terms, Rachel Botsman is a brilliant sort of person that we've been referring to, excuse me, in the book about this. And this idea of, in the 20th century and before, trust sort of was top down. In terms of we would trust the church, we trusted the government, we trusted the police, we trusted the media, and really what's happened is that we trust sideways now. Is her sort of point, and the idea that, for example, thousands of people will trust complete strangers every day in the city of London as they get into the back of an Uber, to trust them that they will get them to, somewhere where they want them to go. So you're trusting strangers, but it's a sideways kind of trust is the kind of pitch. And I think really for advertisers and brands, they're wrestling with this change of idea of being able to control your message and control the trust that people have in what you say, to a much more sort of open environment of people having conversations about you and whether or not you are trustworthy, and how you operate and advertise what it is that you should be trusted for within that environment.
Yeah, I don't think people just kind of were more trusting in the past. I think there's always been dissent, there's always been satire, there's always been people feeling left out and grumpy. But as Matt says, the technology that everyone can now possess and share in just has distributed information and sources of not just data, but thoughts, emotions, life, so widely that there are so many different places that people can find the thing they want, and maybe the truth that they prefer, as it were, that this distributed trust means that it's far more difficult to kind of possess it from the center. And I think business and advertisers have very much responded to that by looking for where trust now lies or can be found, reinforcing it in some of the more traditional media, if you like, but also finding it out through creators and influencers and other aspects of the newer media. So there's a distribution of trust in advertising, just as there is, if you like, in society.
Yeah, and as you say, it's an interesting point with technology, because in a way it's lowered the barriers to entry.
We looked at the Edelman Trust Barometer, right, and we were lucky enough to interview the head of the Trust Institute over in New York, a lady called Tonya Reese. I mean, she's been studying this, and the Edelman Trust Barometer data is based on the first 25 years of the 21st century, and their narrative of what has happened to trust and the breakdown, if you like, or the reorganization of trust is fascinating. Now, Tonya, one of the things we talked about is kind of differences in generations when it comes to trust. Their research, every single generation bar one, when they asked, what's the one thing you can do to a piece of marketing, advertising information that would help you trust it, said fact, had a fact to it, so I trust it. However, the youngest generation said make it authentic. And Tonya's kind of theory on this was that there's a generation of people that are now coming through that have almost they're building in a new muscle in the brain, which is that as they're reading things that may include a fact or not, they're reading it in an instinctive way about whether or not that is authentic to them. And I think that throws up a really interesting kind of new dimension in what we do and don't trust. My worry is I think it's quite possible to be authentic with mistruths and misinformation. So this is I think from a brand point of view, something you've really got to navigate is how you're authentic with genuinely, useful, accurate information that's truthful and trustworthy about your brand. Be really clear about what it is that you want to be trusted for. Define that, understand it, and then find the most authentic way to build trust in that factor about what it is you offer.
If you are a brand in that situation, how should we really go about measuring trust?
It was interesting to us how many of the senior marketers that we spoke to, as soon as the word trust was mentioned, would say, yes, it's absolutely fundamental to our business. Oh, it's a core value of the brand. I mean, automatically and universally, this was something very important. And so then usually Matt would say, and how do you measure that? Well, we don't measure it directly. We've got now in some cases, they did measure it directly. In some cases, the proxy measurements to do with reputation, to do with recommendation, to do with other ways that people might express trust are totally valid. But it was just intriguing that the measurement of trust per se, almost to your earlier point, was kind of taken for granted. That's somewhere sort of underneath everything. And there's the analogy with blood pressure, that it's kind of silent and invisible, but vital to good health. If you abuse it, can be fatal. And yet people haven't perhaps been looking at it quite closely enough. And at a time when, as we've been discussing, there is this fragmentation of trust, let's not say erosion, but it's kind of all over the place, and you need to understand where and how to find it and communicate it. It seems to us rather significant that people haven't measured it, perhaps as rigorously as they might. We encourage them to do so.
And we touch on it in the book, and actually I think there's more work that can be done in this area, because fundamentally no marketing category sector is trusted the same. If you think about it, sort of travel and tourism will be as a sector will be trusted differently to, say, betting and gaming as a sector. So no sector's the same. Then if you take a sector, you would say, well, no brand within that sector, if it's airlines, is trusted in the same way. So once you understand the trust levels in your sector, where then does your brand sit versus your competitive set in terms of the most trusted for what it is you want to be trusted for? Might be Ryanair, and you say, well, we want to be trusted that we give the best price. Okay, fine. Then really understand that. But then the third dimension is no customer trusts the same. Right? A first-time customer will have a completely different trust expectation compared to a long-term customer. And then you've got that sort of individual sense of, everybody has a different worldview and life experience, which also feeds into how much they're going to trust you and your brand. So really, it's a fascinating area. If you really want to understand that connection between your brand and your customer base and who you want to bring in, it's thinking about it in that context.
Just on sort of, and following on from that, what should you do with your brand that's you find out, actually, we're not trusted? I mean, what do you do then?
If find out why.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some case histories in the book, because we talk to a lot of people, and there is some have got some very good written, published stories that are therefore we're able to replicate and to publish. And there's a couple of great stories. McDonald's is one, Tesco's is another, where they had actually lost trust. And they'd sort of woken up to the fact that they'd done things wrong. They'd got things wrong, real practical, everyday things in terms of delivery, in terms of what people were experiencing in their respective places. Because at least they were measuring trust or something very close to it. And the rebuilding has to start with getting the thing right, doing the thing right, competence, if you like. And then on top of that, you can obviously communicate that competence, but also you can build the more positive values of trust, like benevolence. So I'm not just doing the thing right, I'm doing the right thing for you, for my customer. People seeing you go the extra mile, every little helps, is an expression in a way of exactly that. And also demonstrate in your advertising as much as anything else, integrity, live up. And if you're making a promise, you live up to it.
Yeah.
You don't just make the promise and let people be disappointed. Crazy. So in some ways, they're simple things. In other ways, they're really quite hard to do, and you've got to keep doing them. You've got to be consistent, because another value that builds trust is consistency. So it's about campaigns, rather than one-off ads, for instance. So there are a lot of dimensions to it.
And there's also a commercial, fundamental commercial point around it costs you more if you're less trusted. We've seen sort of examples, say, within the sort of telecom sector where, that kind of, if you're less trusted, then to recruit and to retain a customer will cost you more in terms of the offers that you've got to deliver. Equally, if there's a premium value in being the most trusted brand in your sector, it allows you to charge a little bit more. So this is why really from a marketer's perspective, really focusing in on how do I make sure that my brand is the most trusted brand versus the competitors, gives you commercial advantage. It really does. And that's really the argument of the book.
You mentioned McDonald's and Tesco's sort of in your answer. I mean, obviously people will want to have be very interested in your thoughts on of what brands you think are trusted. And again, you've given some reason why that's the case, but what's been the drivers for that trust?
Okay, so I mean, we've just gone through the Christmas advertising period, and reflecting on that. You sort of seen the John Lewis ad again, sort of driving the kind of, there's consistency there in terms of the John Lewis advertising campaign, the Christmas advertising campaign, and IPA effectiveness kind of results, which shows sort of year on year the high quality production values, the emotional storytelling that's in there, sort of recognizable music, all of those techniques and that creativity. And they, yes, from year to year there'll be different customer reactions, but really the John Lewis Christmas ad has become synonymous with that kind of Christmas gifting season. I actually think that we interviewed Charles Vallance from VCCP as part of the book, and Charles makes a very strong point about the importance of brands having their own recognisable asset in order to have the freedom to build consistency and trust in the brand. And probably a wonderful example of that is Kevin the Carrot with Aldi.
Right, okay.
Where you see, consistency year after year, storytelling, humour, and that in all the testing, I would expect that the latest Kevin Aldi Christmas campaign has stood out again. And then you've got obviously the Coca-Cola ad, which bears repetition. The holidays are coming year after year after year. However, it's interesting with that one because they're experimenting with AI with the way in which they're producing that ad, and that's causing quite a sort of range of public reaction as to good or bad, but it's still making sure that the holidays are coming ad is very, very visible. So I would sort of, if you just framed it within the Christmas season, I would point to those three as kind of examples of brands that through consistency, high quality creativity, smart production, great storytelling, visible choice of media that they're appearing in, are building trust in the brands.
And just going back to sort of this point about the use of AI in generating ads, from your standpoint, do you think there's sort of, for many brands, what they run the risk of is subliminally many consumers saying, well, if the advert is fake, sort of what does that say about the brand and the product?
Yeah, I think that is a danger. And at the moment, from our research, not specific to this book, but our broader research, because we survey public opinions on these things through the Advertising Association all the time, people are very wary. The stories they've heard about AI and what it might do to the world, let alone what it might do to an advert, it's slightly less important, but nonetheless closer to home, have got them worried. And therefore there's a very big drive, for instance, to label. There are various politicians who, are urging us on the regulatory side to insist on labeling of anything that's got AI in it. Well, everything's got AI in it one or another, as it has other, visual, audio techniques. So that seems a rather silly thing. But if your AI is spooky, if it is misleading, if it does give people an impression of something which then isn't delivered, then like any other technique in advertising, it's going to prove disappointing. It's going to get you into trouble with regulators or with your consumers. So at the moment, although it is still early days and we still don't know really what it might do, it's already very important, but we don't see it as qualitatively different yet. In people's experience, at least.
There's a couple of thoughts that we sort of touch on in the book. One is, can you trust advertising in the time of AI? AI is going to increase the amount of ads that are out there. So at the core of that is a question about, is the net result of that more ads? Yeah. People will be more trusting of all advertising or less trusting of all advertising. And I'd say we're at a very, very important crossroads in which of those two places we're going to end up. And bringing it back to a marketer who might be listening as well, I do think that that a prevalence and awareness, brand awareness of your brand in the real world is going to be really important if a lot of the sort of recommendations are being driven, if you like, by agentic AI and AI agents working on your behalf, which is why we look at all the different media channels within the book. We ask the question, does it matter where you show up? Yeah. And yes, it does matter greatly where you show up. And your choice of media channels has signaling effects on
absolutely
customers. And you can point to something like out of home. You can say, out of home is public, it is big, writ large. You're making a promise to many people, not just to one individual, on a billboard site. So that's a brand. The trust me implicit messaging in being there on that billboard says something. And I think, for marketers thinking about not just out of home, but the use of different media channels and what it's signaling about the brand that they're in charge of and whether you can trust it, I think is really important.
Well, also as well, again, to pick up on an earlier point, sort of what we're talking about is sort of younger audiences, demographics. That for everyone else, for all other demographic categories, or age categories, it was based around facts. But increasing importance now talking about authenticity. You could make an argument that actually authenticity is another facet of trust. That essentially when people look at somebody and say whether they're being fake or not, it's a natural reaction to say if they are being fake, it's a potential danger because you don't know what else is coming up. So, and the reason why I mention that is if you do have younger audiences who do see authenticity as really the key attribute. Again, when we look at channels, when we look at sort of AI generated ads and so forth, it feels as though that all feeds into the authenticity debate, as it were.
Yeah.
Again, I come back to the point. If you're using AI generated ads, does that say anything does it imply implicitly something fake about your product? If you are using a cheap channel, does it imply again that it's not particularly authentic?
Yeah. Or the actual quality of the creative work in the ad as well. I mean, James, one of the things that we were really surprised about as we started writing the book was we thought the influencer channel would be one of the channels that we wrote about within a chapter. And yet, once we started doing the interviews with marketers, every conversation with a marketer included the indication of increased spend with the influencer channel. And we've ended up writing 2 chapters about influencers. And it's a fascinating, or influencers and or creators, depending on the language that you want to use. But it's a growing media channel within the advertising share. But equally, when you look at it in the round, it's still the least trusted channel of all channels. And when you look at, say, the ASA reports on, whether or not influencers declare ads within commercial posts, there's still much work to do. The numbers have improved from kind of mid 30% to a kind of, late 50. I think it's something like 58% of the ads that were tested. But that's still, that means 2 in 5 commercial pieces of work and influencers that the ASA were tracking weren't actually declared to be an ad in a legal, decent, honest and truthful way. So there's work to do in that channel, I think, to really sort of build not just the authenticity, but the legitimate trust between the brands, the use of the influencer and the audience.
And I mean, not only that, not only is, the influencers don't declare of their interests, but also whether they're actually human or not. I mean, we've had several cases this year where we've had, you suddenly had influencers go viral, only to find out that actually they don't exist.
Yeah. And so it's not really surprising, as Matt says, that when you ask in the round, how trusted, do you trust influencers? Then they do really badly as a kind of set, especially amongst older people. But of course, if you ask people whether they find advertising interesting in any particular context, younger people will tend to talk about those influencers or creators whom they personally follow, they personally trust, they personally believe in, have a relationship with, and they're the most trusted form of, if you like, advertisers that exist. So there's this wonderful dichotomy, but certainly picking up that younger people trust and verify has become a little bit of a thing. They, they're not suckers. They don't just fall immediately into the first AI spoof that they've seen. There is increasing vigilance. Now, there shouldn't have to be. We shouldn't expect our consumers to be vigilant. We don't in media that have traditionally had high standards of regulation and authenticity, if you like. But in the wide and wacky world of online, there is stuff which people have become very wary of. And there is also stuff which they absolutely adore and is the most important thing of all for them, in which advertising has terrific credibility and does very well. So there's, again, an enormous range out there. You've just got to think about what is right for your brand, what is the right company to keep, what is the right context to be found in.
Yeah. And we interviewed different marketers about their use of influencers as part of the book. There's some great stuff. So from NatWest, for example, they described how they think about the sort of use of influencers from 3 buckets. The first is their staff, their employees. In a way, they're the most important influencers. It starts within, from the internal communications and the staff being the advocates of the brand. because they can influence. Then there was a sort of next category, which was, sort of influencers within particular sort of special interest areas that you were trying to then think about how your products can kind of access. So if it's kind of, first-time parents that you're looking to offer kind of, financial support to, then right, okay, well, who's got that particular audience then as an influencer, and how do we build a constructive relationship with them? And then the third bucket were what they described as the celebs, really. I mean, they were a big sponsor of Team GB. So it was in those moments where the Team GB and the Paralympics team stars, how do you then build the kind of, connection with the brand through those sort of three buckets, which I thought was a really sort of wonderful way of kind of thinking about it. But particularly the prompt of the importance of your employees as advocates for your trustworthiness as a brand. Because when you're a huge employer like a Tesco, 250,000 or so employees, if you think about friends and family contact of those employees, you've already got a very large potential customer base. Before you even start thinking about people
base because of all of their social media.
Well, and there's that as well.
So I would absolutely be thinking as a marketer, what are we doing to make sure that the people that work for us are advocates of what we can be trusted for?
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I mean, there are things that seem to be more permanent in human nature. There are things where things sort of more cyclical and go around. The trust element is a permanent feature. As you mentioned, human behaviours. The way that's expressed, is cyclical. I mean, for what it's worth, which is extremely little. I'm sort of slightly sceptical whether the influencer boom will last. I think at some point, what will happen is you'll get a natural reaction against these things, and there'll be sort of, simply because what tends to happen is people rush into a market they think is very lucrative, lowers the standards, sort of, and at some point people get very wary of things, but who knows?
Well, I think your skepticism is an interesting one. I mean, we looked at, for example, what the new Unilever CEO talked about, in terms of scaling the influencer marketing model within the Unilever business worldwide, and wanting, 100 influencers in every zip code in India. And you think, gosh, right, okay, well, how to manage the consistency of brand messaging and the trusted nature of that brand messaging for your product portfolio through that many outlets. That's bigger than, in old money, local media and regional media. And it's individuals. And I do have a question about the average shelf life of an individual influencer versus the average shelf life of, if you like, a trusted media brand like, say, a BBC Gardener's World magazine. And which will last. And, because people's lives will get in the way of perhaps them being, or maybe they'll evolve in terms of what they are famous for as influencers as they go through life. So it's not easy. I mean, I think that was the other thing that we saw, is marketers acknowledge it is way more complex than it has ever been to protect and build trust in a brand.
And I want to come on to the regulation point. Well, the CAP and also the SAA in things. So, because I think sort of listeners would probably find that quite useful. Can you just do a brief sort of run through?
Since I'm chairman of CAP,
Yeah.
I should be able to do that vaguely.
Yeah.
Right.
Put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, the ASA system, because the ASA is, if you like, the umbrella brand for the regulatory system we have, is a mixture of self-regulation and statutory stuff. And the way we run it is that CAP, which is the Committees of Advertising Practice, are the rule makers. So we're the legislature, and that's an industry body.
Yeah.
That is made up of representatives from all the kind of advertising, right around the advertising ecosystem. So Outsmart, for instance, represent the outdoor industry on CAP. And we're responsible for those rules of advertising. Now, most of them are derived from law. Most of them are trying to make the law usable, practical, expressible. Some of them are very much our own when you get into areas like offence and what ads, shouldn't be like in terms of their content. And those rules are then administered by a judge and jury, if you like, which is the ASA. So they're the judiciary, and they're independent. They're nothing to do with the industry, except that the industry ultimately funds them. So it's an industry-funded system. It's an industry rule maker, but the judiciary is independent. And then it's up to the industry ultimately to enforce the rulings of the ASA through the media. So media playing their part in that respect, as well as in collecting the levies that are needed to fund it all. So it's a system that's had a pretty good 60 years. It's got more on its plate now than ever before because of the sheer diversity and quantity, scale and scope of what advertising now is, because we do look after all advertising, everything online and websites actually come under the codes and under the ASA's jurisdiction, and the government and Ofcom and the Gambling Commission and the MHRA and all sorts of other regulators expect us to be there as the front line for consumers. And as Matt says, that means fielding complaints, which has been the traditional way that it's been done, but now more than 60% of the cases covered coming from a proactive scanning of the market, principally online, to determine just really what is out there and are there areas which need sorting out, some extra help.
And one of the interesting things that we've seen from our own research at the AA and working in partnership with the ASA is we track the public's trust in advertising. And while it's not a silver bullet, awareness levels of the ASA help build people's trust in advertising. Fundamentally, if people know that they see an ad and they can complain about it and something is then done about it, they are more likely to trust advertising overall. And also, to sort of, stress the point of the effectiveness of it, I think, the compliance rates of advertising in the UK is in the very high 90s in terms of the percent each year in terms of compliance rates. And the ASA is very good at, drawing public attention to offenders who break the rules. And, that's then an uncomfortable place for a brand to be. And that will continue.
Yeah, brands, companies, corporations go to great lengths when hauled up, perhaps, by the ASA over a possible infringement of the rules to either justify what they've done, which can often be, fine, or to apologise and get the thing out the way. It's a big deal for a company to be sort of publicly shamed. The press carry the stuff every week. It's interesting, really, how much, again, reputation, let's say that's the underpin of trust, does matter in that context as well. Because there isn't a financial penalty. No one's taking their money away, but it's saying your ad wasn't fair. Your ad wasn't legal, decent, honest, or truthful in some way. And that hurts. And boardrooms get exercised. So it's important that marketers always bear that one in mind, and certainly outdoor have been very good at, for instance, using the copy advice service, because there's a part of the system is to give advertisers advice on their ads. Is this one going to be okay? Can't promise you, but probably yes or probably no. And outdoor has actually been really good in using that facility to help make sure that what we see on the streets and outside is legitimate, is good stuff.
But the implications of not following the rules is, ultimately regulatory intervention. This is why marketers should care about this, because, if advertising isn't following the rules, then you may see then intervention from government in order to
of course.
force that through.
Yeah.
That then means you may be more restricted in what
Yeah.
you can and can't say and where you want to say it,
Yeah.
which is certainly the scenario that the industry has worked through over the past 12 months in particular around less healthy food marketing.
I really want to home in on the commercial impact sort of from trust. Because at the end, Dave, you're a CFO, CEO. What you're really sort of interested in is the bottom line on things. So for any sort of marketers out there who have to go back and explain to their boards why trust is so important, having that commercial argument is key. What would you say to them? What would be the points you say to them as to say, look, you as a board, if you don't recognise the importance of trust, you're putting your profits at risk.
I don't think there's anyone in business who would contest the assertion that to have consumer trust means you will have more consumers and consumers for longer. I don't think there's any kind of question about the fundamental value of trust in a business. Where the book focuses is on what does that mean for advertising, and how does trusted advertising contribute to that underlying imperative. And that's where some of the cases are quite intriguing to make, as I was saying earlier, real that golden thread between the advertising and the brand performance with trust as the metric or the driver. So I think I mentioned earlier that one of the cases in the book being the McDonald's case. And they had measured love and trust as emotional brand values alongside more practical and immediate operational experiential values, let's say. And they came to realize that the biggest predictors of restaurant visits were the values of love and trust, rather than some of the others that they had been focused on, more short-term perhaps, more practical sounding maybe. And it was by thinking again about how they therefore should present themselves in real terms as well as in ads, but in their advertising, and the nature of the emotional appeal and the authenticity, to use a word that's come up a lot, of how they show people, families, friends, and their experiences of McDonald's, that could make a real difference. And it did. And seeing the scores of love and trust recover and grow during the 2010s, essentially, was pretty strongly correlated with the campaigns that they ran, which boosted those values, and the success that they had as a brand and as a business. And they're not alone.
Yeah.
And that's one of the IPA effectiveness case studies that we have in the book. We trawled through with the help of the IPA team to look for the standout examples, because that's really a treasure trove, if you like, of the world's most effective advertising. Another case study that I point to, though, is GiftGaff.
Okay.
And we interviewed the marketing team at GiftGaff about how and where trust fits within their sort of thinking. And they interestingly, right from the outset in the interview, they didn't talk about customers. They talked about members of their community. And their mindset was that GiftGaff is building a community. And everything they do with their advertising and marketing was really focused on how they reinforce the sense of trust that exists within the community. They have a responsible marketing manifesto. They look at their media choices with intense scrutiny, making sure that where they show up chimes with where they feel they will be most trusted with their audience. Now, what's the commercial result of that? Commercial result is they have a recommender kind of member get member, and around 20% of their new customer business comes from member referral. So 1 in 5 new customers is coming from your own customer base as a result of you being trusted.
And that's extremely impressive.
Yeah.
And if you think what companies always ask us after some experience we've had with them, almost whoever they are, is the recommender score.
Yeah.
Will you give us some feedback? And it's the recommender score. Now, what does that mean? That means that you would be prepared to put forward that brand, that company, to your friends, to your family.
Yeah.
On what basis will you do that, if not that you can trust it to deliver for them? That what you're saying is going to be, as it were, truthful, but that you trust that company and therefore you're prepared to put it forward. I mean, that's the fundamental underlying value of those recommender scores, which apparently correlate more than anything else with customer satisfaction and with the ability to grow. So,
we always end these on sort of really asking sort of if there's one piece of advice you could give to the listeners, and a key takeaway, what would it be? So, I don't know. Matt, you started first, so why don't we actually go to James?
Yeah, as we said, trust, like blood pressure, can be sort of silent and invisible, and you might not be thinking about it day to day, but ignoring it, let alone abusing it, can be fatal. So if you're not aware of how people feel about your brand and how that's reflected in your advertising and how they feel about that from the perspective of its integrity, its reliability, its truthfulness, its trustworthiness, then you're just missing out on a fundamental element of what your marketing thinking should be about. So look at it and measure it.
Very, very good point. And Matt?
Yeah, to build on that, I mean, I think in simple terms, I'd love for a marketer to say, when they see the next sort of advertising plan from their team, is where's trust on this plan? Just ask that question. Is the result of this advertising campaign going to be that our brand is more trusted than it currently is? Or is it going to be less trusted because of what we're choosing to do? Or do we just not know? So, fundamentally, is trust on the plan.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, James and Matt, for such a thoughtful conversation on why trust must sit at the heart of modern marketing. Their new book, Trusted Advertising, is out now. If you'd like to explore these themes further, look out for Trusted Advertising or visit the JCDecaux Marketing Hub for more insights and case studies. Thanks for listening, and wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.